Welcome everyone to the first Jewish Psychedelic Summit, Ask the Psychedelic Rabbi Q&A panel. It's so glad to see the room filling up. If you would like, if you want to put into the chat where you're joining us from, people have been saying the cities that they've been living in. If you know to say the indigenous land that you are zooming in from. We'll start momentarily as people continue to join. This is amazing. I mean, it's just everywhere. Isn't this fantastic? Right, like, wow, wow, wow. Welcome all you very holy people from all over the world. Welcome Honolulu, Beit Shemesh. I'll also let people know that we have some questions prepared for our rabbi panelists, but if you feel called, there is the Q&A function. And if you have a question that you would like to have one of our rabbis answer, please put it into the Q&A. I'll be checking there for questions, and we have some questions also prepared. So we'll see how all of this goes. We'll get started in about 1 minute. So I would also like to invite people, if you're coming from somewhere from before, an activity, another Zoom room, the bathroom, lunch, maybe just to invite yourselves here to this moment, to this new Zoom room, to the freshness of what is possible. So welcome again to everyone to the very first Jewish Psychedelic Summit and the first Jewish Psychedelic Summit Rabbi Panel Q&A. I want to remind everyone that there's the chat opportunity to speak to other participants. And if you have a question for any of our rabbis, you can put it into the Q&A. So just letting people know. My name is Rabbi Zach Kamenetz. I am the founder and CEO of Shefa, Jewish Psychedelic Support, and a co-founder and organizer of our summit. With me today are 5 fantastic panelists, and I will give them a brief intro and then ask them all to say a little bit about their entheogenic life and how it has brought them to their rabbinate, or how it has influenced what they're doing with their rabbinate today. First, Rabbi Shefa Gold, who gave a beautiful invocation this morning. Rabbi Shefa is a rabbi, scholar, and director of Sea Deep, the Center for Devotional Energy and Ecstatic Practice. Rabbi Shir Yaakov Feit, singer, composer, designer, producer, teacher, and founder and spiritual director of Kol Chai Hudson Valley Jewish Renewal. We're also joined by Rabbi Lori Shapiro, who's the founding rabbi and artistic director of Open Temple in Venice, California, who is joined with Zach Pudko, who is the divine rhymer of Open Temple. And finally, Rabbi Michael Ziegler, my neighbor, rabbi, musician, and faculty and co-founder of numerous institutions, most notably the Guiding Presence. Welcome to all of our panelists. And I might just say, Rabbi Shir Yaakov, if you could let us know where is the entheogenic, the psychedelic life, where is that moving with you and your rabbinate today?
Thank you. And thank you all for being here, being together. Today, in some way, feels like coming out, that the time is right. And in some way, it feels like the curtain is being pulled away, that I'm being pushed a little bit too soon into this space. It's with trembling and awe that I stand here, hoping to kind of heal a split between, these intersectionalities between my life. I kind of want to put the psychedelic and the rabbi together, and I don't think they have ever been. Your beautiful conversation with Rabbi Art Green just a few days ago thanked you for entering into that conversation with him. And some of that revelation feels like it gives me reshut and permission to share the ways that my psychedelic journey has brought healing and insight and inspiration, and also was a traumatic, lonely, and kind of wild and woolly one. So it brings me to this moment with awe.
Well, we are in continuous awe of you and all of the work that you do. So thank you for being here. And we're going to walk together through that curtain. Don't worry, you're not alone, obviously, here with 225 more of your psychedelic best friends and congregants. Let's hear from Rabbi Shefa. Where does this work intersect with your rabbinate?
You know, it was a couple of years ago when Michael Pollan's book came out of How to Change Your Mind that I came to the realization of that psychedelics had been so important, such a gift for me of opening me up and bringing me into this place of the possibilities of consciousness. And I realized that what I bring Jewishly is really influenced by those openings. So again, I feel very close to what Shir Yaakov said about, coming into my integrity to acknowledge that fact. And I think that where it sent me, because I kind of was taking psychedelics in my 20s mostly, and where it sent me was to become an explorer of consciousness, and to explore states of consciousness, of what it meant to be in a state. A state of consciousness determines how I perceive the world. It determines the access that I have to my own resources, and those states are always changing. But what I became curious about is what happens when I bring awareness to the state? How does it change it? How does it provide me access to that state? And so I began doing practices, Jewish practices, that would bring me to various states, and then I would go into a place of awareness of that state, so that I could anchor it in and be able to get back there. The other thing that I think that when I was kind of overwhelmed by my experience in psychedelics, and I realized that I didn't have a good container. I didn't have a vessel to hold everything that could come into me. And so I set myself on a path of building a mishkan, building a container, a vessel, and so that I could open to that divine flow that I knew was there, and not be overwhelmed by it, and instead to be able to channel it in my generosity. And stay to be able to stay centered, at the same time open to the divine flow. And so that building project really is really what my life became: building a mishkan of the heart, building a mishkan of the body and of the field and of relationship, so that the mishkan exists for a sense of innerness, and a sense that innerness is infinite. So I'm grateful also to come out as a psychedelic rabbi, and to say I don't do psychedelics now very, very often, but I figured once a year I needed an inoculation against materialism. That's what and I inoculate myself once a year with the spirit of the mushroom. So
thank you, Shefa, for all your wisdom. Rabbi Michael, please, why don't you share?
I think my journey began in the 60s, and I want to honor Stanley Owsley and Nick Sands, who made a very powerful, they were the first chemists who created LSD for a broader public. And I think my experience with LSD at that time had a paradigm, to use Reb Zalman's terminology, a paradigm shifting opportunity in terms of, and introduced me to one of many what I would call technologies of the sacred. That informed kind of a mystical interest, and certainly before I went to rabbinical school. Since then, over the years, I've been very interested in the use of expanded states of consciousness to access these kind of refined mind states that occasion kind of spiritual and religious openings. And in that time, I've had the pleasure and opportunity to do ceremonies with shamans in South America, and in the synagogue in Ashland, Oregon, to do ayahuasca with the Santo Daime Church, to introduce Michael Pollan to his underground guide so that he could have a direct experience that he could write about. I founded the Ketamine Training Institute so that people could use a legal psychedelic and learn how to do that skillfully. Most recently, I kind of, I'm not that interested in treatment of pathologies, but really the betterment of well people. And so I created a program at the Chaplaincy Institute called The Guiding Presence, which seeks to kind of bring elders in the space, people who've conducted collectively, I don't know, over 25,000 sessions, so that their voices could be heard to this emerging generation who wants to do this kind of work. So I see myself really as a bridge builder to bring the elder wisdom of people who have been doing these sessions for decades to the next generation. And the Guiding Presence is really that opportunity. Once COVID's passed, we're probably going to go into a more, which has been virtual. I'm hoping that moves into a more experiential, the side of that could be available as well.
Thank you, Michael. And I do encourage people, of course, we'll ask people what they're up to right now and how the participants and people listening can find you and your work. I just want to underline the Guiding Presence, such a rich resource for so many people who are interested in this kind of sacred work, and just how much effort and professionalism has gone into Rabbi Michael's work in that regard. Rabbi Lori and Zach, please, where is this meeting you and your rabbinic work?
Well, shalom, y'all. Thank you so much for inviting us into the panel. We're in Venice, California, and I say it's an epicenter of microdosing and finding alternatives to SSRIs and ways of balancing social pressures, stress factors in modern day life with alleviating and feeling more balanced. I think it's happening in a very normative way here in Venice. And as far as myself and my personal journey, I didn't grow up with Jewish identity, and I fell into Judaism by falling into Sfat within 48 hours of going to Israel for the first time. And I ended up staying there for 3 years. So that in and of itself was a psychedelic experience. I out myself today. A lot of people identify me as a psychedelic rabbi. And what I share with everyone here with such humility is I've tried pot once in my life. I'm allergic to wine. I've never tasted a beer. And I think people see me as a natural mystic and a natural high. And I hold such embrace and open heart for all paths being a way. Any way is a way, if only we find the way to that way. And I think all too often in Judaism, we've been in the prat instead of the klal. We've been in the narrowness instead of the expansiveness. And I think we live in a time where obviously when you see people falling away from Judaism, that we're not offering the essence of being alive anymore. And when I look at methods, whether it's Musar or whether it's more mystical traditions of Judaism, it's so clear that something happened in the 20th century where we pathologized spiritual experiences and created disciplines in psychology and social science. Something was lost, and we entered into a galut of the soul. And I think disciplines of medicine that are bringing forward microdosing. We've had panels on this here at Open Temple, and we bring in dozens and dozens of people who are experimenting. It's obvious that people are hungry for some sort of spiritual sustenance. And I brought in our medicine man, Zach Pucktel, who works as a local leader in ritual of medicine. I'm going to have him introduce himself now. So Zach.
Thank you. So first and foremost, gratitude for being here amongst all of you rabbis and holy people and everyone joining across the country. I'm called a divine rhymer because I learned how to freestyle to open up my communication. When I was a younger man, I was what some might consider like a super athlete. I was just amazing at all the sports, and I developed an identity around it that wasn't true to who I was. When I took psychedelics, when I took mushrooms for the first time at 16, I saw past the veil for the first time. My own veil, my own lie to myself, ego-based, material, physical being. And ever since then, I have been holding ceremony with mushrooms for the past 8 years or so. I'm excited for the decriminalization of them in California, in Colorado, in Mexico, in Chicago, and some of the other places, and the healing that's available for all people. I grew up Jewish. I was bar mitzvahed. My bar mitzvah never felt like a ritual, like a rite of passage to me. I was never like, I didn't become a man after it. It was just something I had to do. And I think the place of medicine in our communities and in our lives is this opportunity to have a real rite of passage, to remember who we are. And for me, it's the oneness, it's the connectivity to the God, the energy, the universe. Use your term, that which connects us all, the back fabric. And so I've used the medicine throughout the years to open myself to who I am and who I believe we are. And it's exciting that Judaism is opening up like this in a conference like this and having this discussion because it's important for all religions, I think, to ground in the medicine of oneness.
And I just add to that, I think Open Temple is a place where we've created a platform for mystical liminal experiences whereby we can collapse the duality and experience the numinous presence in our midst.
Thank you both. Zach, you talked and touched upon the life cycle event of your bar mitzvah or someone's bat mitzvah, b mitzvah, and what you weren't experiencing there versus what you had experienced with mushrooms or with psychedelic compounds. Rick Doblin had spoken about that also during our introduction this morning, and so maybe I want to jump in. People have talked about who they are as a psychedelic rabbi, but really, if I could ask all of our panelists, and maybe we'll start with you, Shir Yaakov, how might we begin to share more publicly to create authentic Jewish containers and content for preparing, exploring, and integrating psychedelic states? What are those sacred technologies? How might we start to blend these things with regard to ritual and life cycle?
We're doing it here. We're doing it now. Thank God. Torah ein niknet ele bechavura. The Torah is not made embodied or grounded or real on this plane until we're in dialogue, until we're in relationship, until we're in conversation about it. I've known Reb Shefa for 20 plus years now, and we never had a conversation about this until we were invited to this panel, right? And one of the most heartbreaking things, again, to quote back that Reb Art Green interview, which I think is just one of the best things I've seen recently, he hadn't spoken for 50 years with one of his colleagues who was some anonymous leader of another Jewish institution about their experiences. I'm here kind of atypically down in Manhattan in my mom's apartment, which was the site of the psychedelic trauma I experienced before because I took what might be called a heroic dose of LSD when I was 16 alone. I mean, I thought I was going to go out. I thought I was going to be held, and I wasn't. And it really unmoored me in incredible ways and sent me in some way. I mean, that seeking of the B mitzvah, of looking for depth, for meaning, for feeling the educational system, even the great spiritual education I had wasn't preparing me for the world that was in front of my eyes. I am only in the past year or two starting to recognize that it wasn't the molecules that harmed me, but it was the lack of proper kavanah or keva of set and setting, not knowing what the substance was, not having a sitter, all of those things, all of this language, which in part that language is being shared through things like the guiding presence, through these elders who still have so much to show, to touch, to guide. So I think chavrusa, that's like, I think really, al tifrosh minat tzibor. Too many people are going away and separating themselves because they don't think they have someone who they can prepare properly with, or journey properly with, or integrate properly with. And so those are some of the reasons I'm here. And to speak again to this risk that it feels like I'm taking, I think the rewards on the other side, it's a risk to no longer speak about this. Poch chazi mai amad davar, like the people are doing this, and the rabbis need to catch up if we're going to create communities and containers of meaning. That's just a start. I have more, but I want to hear from my chavrusa, from my chabura, from my colleagues now too.
Rabbi Michael, thank you, Rabbi Shir Yaakov. Rabbi Michael, you have mentioned these as technologies of the sacred, these plants, these compounds, these medicines. Are there accompanying technologies of the sacred in Jewish tradition, which you find that have really been able to heighten this work in plant medicine that you have in the space, as you said? What are you reaching for when you're looking for Jewish technology to think about psychedelic experience in a deeper way? You're on mute, my friend.
Let's envision a future in which, let's just imagine psychedelics are legal. And in that case, I could, and some of this work has been going on for many decades, but in a much more discrete level, but let's just bring it to light. For example, using MDMA for intergenerational trauma. The Jewish people have a lot of that, and there's a lot to be discovered and healed there using that. There's also the exploration using psychedelics of the Jewish mystical universe. I mean, Reb Zalman was really into that, exploring the Sfirot, the Adam Kadmon, kind of using that as a map of exploring the body in a psychedelic session. The opportunity that I mentioned, for example, of having the experience of drinking ayahuasca in the synagogue and doing a Torah service, that in that kind of expanded state of awareness. I mean, these are not for everybody, and really, I don't want to say that, and I think there needs to be some preparation to be able to be skilled to do, for example, intergenerational trauma or hold space for a large group of people in the synagogue on high doses of psychedelics. But I want to give you like a sense of what's possible and what may be. We have the opportunities. I mean, within the Jewish culture, we have the maps, we have the technologies. Another thing, think about between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to do kind of a sacred inner journey, and that part of that might be a deep forgiveness practice, really, with yourself and with other people. I mean, so I could go on, but we're not lacking for opportunities.
Yeah, so it sounds like almost everything is ripe with potential, depending on how the skillful practitioner, the skillful rabbi, will choose to apply it. Rabbi Lori.
I'm so glad you said that, Rabbi Michael. I just got back from Santa Fe, and Shefa, like, shame on me for not looking you up if you were there. But a friend of mine is a deep active member of the UDV church there, and they're the Brazilian church that was the Supreme Court case for legalizing Huasca within ritual. And I'm so compelled by how it's used. They welcome people in. They have ways to, the feds make them have a very thoughtful manner of enrolling people in the ritual space. But every Sunday that they meet, they offer a Huasca tea. They call ayahuasca Huasca in this Brazilian community. And it's really used in a ceremony of truth telling, and a ceremony, one question is asked and people are allowed through the tea to open themselves up to the voices and the Kamenetz, the intentions of what are coming through them. And it's radically embracing. It almost feels like a hearth of being in their community. And like Rabbi Michael said, I'm really curious if we can create these containers for those who are curious. I also always say, I don't think everyone is going to want to engage in that. But what I have found is that when people are open, those who are not engaging become more open, because they suddenly allow their filters to fall. And I think it's so important that we cast a really wide embrace for all people to come forward and allow those early adopters to lead the way for others to be more radically self-accepting. And I'm hoping something like UDV's work can perhaps be a light to how we in the Jewish world can begin to embrace these rituals.
Certainly, definitely maps and models that already exist. I think the idea of looking at, and with an eye towards sacred reciprocity, right? That there are already cultures for whom these plant medicines have been part of their culture and their spiritual practice for generations, and how we think about if we're going to start bringing these into the Jewish spiritual tradition in legal or other responsible ways. How are we giving also, not just taking and receiving, but also giving to that other line of tradition? Rabbi Shefa, do you want to say something on this point?
I just want to say that one of the reasons I became a rabbi is because I have lots of experiences in my life, but I don't know what it means necessarily to live in the light of those experiences. And the idea that my rabbinate, for me, is about unfolding the implications. If I see that something is true, and maybe I see that in an altered state, and then I need to live it somehow. And I think that's the difficult transition. There's this idea of, like, what I want is a continuity of access to that truth, so that it's not something that's coming and going, and and placing me in a way that's disjointed or unharmonious, like that I know something but I live something else. And so Judaism for me can be a kind of a way of taking those experiences and now pouring them into these forms and creating new Jewish forms that can help me live the truth that I glimpsed.
So I might actually, just on this point, Rabbi Shefa, and I'll ask this to all of our panelists here, with the truth and the life lived. I think that's an interesting dynamic. Sometimes during psychedelic consciousness, we can encounter disruptive clarities and noetic types of knowledge that can challenge or even undermine our relationships to traditions, relationships, and institutions. How do psychedelic rabbis, people who are emissaries or advocates of the tradition themselves, navigate that space of being open to new information and new reality, while also advocating for the tradition that they might be using to support these experiences themselves?
I think that the idea of being an advocate or an emissary is what's difficult, because I don't want to be that. What I want to do is to be someone that helps to uncover treasures of my inheritance that are useful, and learn a kind of a Jewish language that is going to help me live what my truth is. And so the idea of my identity is I'm a soul, and I am doing this Jewish trip now. And I want to do it impeccably. I want to do it with integrity, and I find that I have inherited this treasure house, And if I can bring these treasures forward, I don't really need to make anybody do anything or say anything or be anything. All I have to do is say, here, this is far out. This is wonderful. Taste this. Let's experience this together. And then there'll be a kind of a congruence with what we know deeply.
I guess that question about intervention, the level of intervention of the guide or the shaman here too, right? What is the level of intervention of the psychedelic rabbi? I'd love to open that up to others. Maybe Michael, do you want to speak to this?
The first thing I want to say is that we don't want to fetishize molecules. For myself, psychedelic I find is its own troubling nomenclature, that really the sensibility that I want to communicate with that word is an expanded sense of awareness, not that it's not, and it's about that which is the meaning making, which is derived by the individual. And it's not the molecule, it's the individual. So meaning making, I want to return meaning making to the individual and give these materials are simply catalysts. And so really it's how to use them wisely. And so I think that's for me, the crux of this is the wise use. I really want to stand on the shoulders of what Shefa said, and that my job isn't to be an evangelical for psychedelics. My job is to know what's the skillful means, how to hold space, how to help people digest whatever arises in their awareness, in their experience. We don't really want to, I think ethically, we don't want to drive subjective experience in the people who we work with. We want to give them that autonomy.
Yeah, not seeing this as a means of chemical kiruv in any way, but something else, something richer, wholesome, and focused on the individual, and not making the compound itself, or even the sitter or the guide, to be the center, but the center focus of the person who's having this experience. Yes, Rabbi Shir Yaakov.
I think Reb Lori had a finger up first. I can jump in at any moment. So, I mean, I love the psychedelic nature of this conversation. I mean, we talked about chemical kiruv, and also with emissary, I think of shlichut, of being, you know, Reb Zalman, my teacher, our teacher, was one of the very first two of shluchim in this country, but asking answering a different question: what would the addition of psychedelic training add to the ways that rabbis have been trained in the past? He added, it would fall under the umbrella of deep ecumenism, right? That you can't come out of these experiences without a real sympathetic view of other religions, right? So there is some sort of fear. We have these extraordinary experiences, and the known boundaries, or the known borders, or the known surface area between Judaism and anything else becomes unclear, ungrounded, perhaps Ein Sof, unlimited. And yet we can also return, and part of the healing, because I think one of the themes of this summit is around healing Jewish trauma, is to return to see the beauty and the, you know, hinach yafarayati, the innate wholeness, right? Reb Shefa talked about unfolding the implications, and I was thinking of David Bohm's wholeness and the implicate order. There's something implicate in Torah, implicate in Chassidut, implicate in mysticism, with whatever language, kol netivoteh hashalom, right? Reb Lori, all of the pathways are peace, to allow people to come home. How many people go to the ashram and then are told by their guru, hey, you should really check out, like I did. My first meditation teacher said to me, you need to go chant some Hebrew, right? Which is how I found my way back, in part. So it's not only shlichut for these parts, like I love returning the value of the individual and returning meaning making to this locus, but then again, within the chabura, within the minyan, within the kihila kedosha, we have enough individuals, we have enough near individuals, we have enough fragmented individuals. How do we open people more to our achdut, our unity, and then sofa davar ma'aseh, make it a lived, walk the talk, dance the dance as she dances us towards love, that we can return and have communities of individuals that aren't so afraid of the truths that may come in different languages and different forms, and to also embrace the ones that may be inborn and whole and part of kind of our spiritual DNA, if that resonates with the seekers who we serve.
Rabbi Lori, did you want to add something here to this question, this point, this flow that we're in right now?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about tenuot and different denominationalism, and I was thinking about just the tragedy that happened at Har Meron this week. And I mean, that's like Dafka, the kever of Shimon Bar Yochai, like the Rashbi is buried there. And we go to that holy site to pray, you know, and to receive. It's a place of, it's a place of galui, it's a place of revelation for many of us. And to see in the name of tradition, such a tragedy, when it was done, you know, people had kavanot, and yet in that sect of Hasidut or Orthodox Judaism, something was lost. I'm just giving this extreme example because I'm asking Lag BaOmer is a mystical experience. And in the midst of a mystical experience, a tragedy happened. And so was there really an elevated mysticism on Hamaron last week? Or are we living with a klipa? Are we living in galut? Are we living, in a place that there is this fracture between the desire for a mystical experience and actually what we're offering in the different movements of Judaism? And I offer that because I think it's really important for those that enter into this journey, that many people are living either under an idea that Judaism is one way and their way is that one way, right? Or they're living in this place of, as I said earlier, like expanded open-heartedness. And I guess I can't help but think that this summit is coming in the wake of this tragedy. And I just need to say on the zechut of those who died, like we must figure this out, because what happened there, I think, I don't want to ever give a negative to a tragedy, right? I want to be compassionate, but in the desire, the zealousness of having a mystical experience that night, something grave happened and something was lost. So I just wanted to offer that, because they were seeking that night. And so we need to tread very lightly. We don't want to become like Nadav and Avihu, right? You don't want to bring the fires and get burned. So I needed to offer that to this conversation, because we as rabbis need to create these holy spaces so that people can be safe and have mystical experiences in whatever way they might. So how can we get there is my question. I needed to offer that here today. Thank you.
I appreciate for you speaking that. I might also just say that, in any setting where in any setting, right, to be aware of the setting that is becoming the vessel or the container for the experience, right? There's also the responsibility of the people who are holding that container to make sure that it is the most safe for the people who are going through that experience. Mm-hmm. And then it also when people are seeking out what is culturally relevant and normative to them, this kind of collective effervescence that certainly happens at Meron, people not being aware of the setting all the time that happens. So want to, first of all, just to honor and acknowledge that there are conditions that people might not have been aware of, and at the same time that there's like a true desire to make connections in the ways that feel culturally appropriate. I want to change gears for a moment. Some people have talked about this, and it's actually come up in the chat. Just this past week, we saw an article coming out of New York about a rabbi who had used spiritual teaching, and this is not the first time, it won't be the last time, who had used Martin Buber's I, thou modality in order to abuse his power and to seek persuasion, sexual persuasion over some of his congregants, right? So using that spiritual technology as a means of serving their own physical and erotic ends. So I want to put this question out to the group, to bring Michael Pollan back in. He told me, or he told us, that when he's been speaking about his book, the people have been on the edge of their seats waiting for him to start talking about the risks. And he learned that usually he mentions the risks last, but that's what people wanted to hear most. So in that spirit, given the suggestibility and vulnerability that often accompany someone within a psychedelic experience, what might a psychedelic rabbinic code of ethics look like to mitigate the potential for abuse or impropriety against the persons that they are supporting?
Can I offer, if you, on the website CSP, the Council for Spiritual Practices, there's a code of ethics for that's a really great opportunity for people to go more deeply into that. I think also the work of Kylia Taylor, who wrote a book called The Ethics of Caring, which is really about how to hold space compassionately and ethically in expanded states of awareness, because the level of abuse which is possible is extreme, and so for me, it's double. There's two sides of the same coin. On one side, there has to be a clearly articulated psychedelic ethics. On the other hand, there needs to be absolute accountability for those people who practice in that regard, that there are consequences for bad actions.
Yeah, I would just add to that, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, and the underground has in some way developed means for grounding our practices. And also we're talking about a very wide, when we speak about risk and we speak about boundary rupture and we lump that all under the term psychedelic, depending on which modality we use, whether we're working on a one-on-one basis or on a group basis, whether we're working with a psycholytic or psychedelic dosage, what materials, what molecules. I mean, I think any spiritual leader should have gone through a Klei Kodesh formation to really understand how power works, generally speaking. I think a lot of that just applies. I've been gently leading non-ordinary states of consciousness through song and drum, and it's very easy to abuse that power just as simply as and people seeking healing through belonging to a community or seeing someone who may feel more grounded in this world if they're feeling untethered. Those dynamics are constantly at play. So the general practices of clinical pastoral education should be continued to be practiced by anyone who's in this role. And belonging. We don't have, we see how the abuses of power in other religious forms that are hierarchical can get totally out of hand for generation upon generation. But we have a different risk within the Jewish community, even if on some mystical level, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Lazeh, we don't have a systems of accountability across the denominations or across even within the denomination. And it's very easy for people to go rogue. So it's so important that some of this comes to light, leaves the underground, but stays rooted, and we can, also finally teach some of these teachings in the names of our teachers.
Thank you. Thank you for those answers. I do want to get to some other questions that have been in the Q&A. There have been some things that have had overlap with the questions that we had prepared beforehand, and now just want to make sure that some people who are asking in the moment can also be part of the conversation. So one person asks, I'm planning a psychedelic trip for a small group of friends this summer and would like to use Jewish prayer and meditative practice as the set and setting. Rabbis, do any of you have recommendations for what traditions or liturgy here is an important thing. I think we've brought it up in some ways, but now maybe to focus on it. What traditions or liturgy I might incorporate? Thank you.
All right, can I make a suggestion? We have, I think, to hold it in, start with the Baruch Hu, and once everybody has kind of passed peak, use the technology of nigganology, of the niggin. Perhaps ask everybody around the circle to sing the song of their soul wordlessly, not with words, but just with niggins, as to what their felt experience is, and then pass that around the circle and everyone listen deeply.
I think in a certain way, once you've had some of these experiences, diving into liturgy and being in the conversation of Olam HaNeshamot and of the Avinun of the ancestors in some way. I heard in that question too about preparing, and so a sidebar chat, well, hey, this is not about the molecules for me. I'm just interested in these expanded states. I think if we looked at Shema al Hamita in and of itself as what it might be to take seriously the Harini Mochel Moshe Hichnis Oti, to let go of anger and begin with a place of compassionate release. Bein Gilgul Zeh, Bein Gilgul Aher, to take seriously some of the liturgy that says we've been here before and we could be here again, and we don't necessarily know how these things are impacting us. Hameir Haaretz Kulo Bichvodo, that we are potentially preparing for an experience where the numinous presence becomes everything we see, Rigzu v'al techetau odon olam. I mean, that one liturgy in and of itself could be, we could study that for a year as the preparation text for, are we ready as individuals or as guides or as a community to surrender what we know and to pray for return. And then I think Tachanun in general is maybe a good way to come back in. Tehillim, Perek Shira, they're like, any liturgy could be developed. And what I think Michael is pointing out, the non-conceptual, the non-language-based, embodied, melodic. I mean, we're in the presence of a chant master here too. I see, Red Shefa, you're already taking it away.
I would just say, I think that maybe I am a psychedelic rabbi even without psychedelics, because what I'm interested in is the depth. And I know that one word or one phrase, that there are worlds and worlds and worlds in it. And that's the same experience I have with psychedelics, is that I don't have to say all of these words. I can enter through the word, and it can be a doorway for me. So I guess my advice is to stay, with, to minimize the content and to maximize the depth and the sense of being on an adventure through this magic incantation that we have inherited.
I want to get to integration, which is something that I feel that needs to be part of this conversation more often also, right? Not just the experience itself, but how we make it live and how we make it grounded in our daily waking consciousness. There's another question in the Q&A that said, what do you suggest to someone who has had a traumatic psychedelic experience, who ultimately struggles with integrating the experience into their everyday life? Maybe Lori or Zach, do I pass this off to you first?
I said take more. And I don't say it lightly. I reference, Terrence McKenna saying the worst thing that you can do while taking mushrooms is to not take enough. And I believe that when you take enough medicine, it actually makes it easier to surrender in the space of spirit, which is the key to the kingdom of heaven. Through surrender, through the let go of knowledge, of control, of the illusion of all the things. When you take just a little bit, you can get stuck and almost go, I want something, and then the thoughts start cascading, and you go down the rabbit hole into the dark place because you didn't give the medicine the chance. And so, like, the scariest thing, it might seem counterintuitive, but I'd say take more.
Yeah, might be counterintuitive. I'm thinking the advice, ifcha mistabra, like the opposite opinion, that once you get the call, hang up the phone. So how do we balance the desire to have more with the ability to know when is enough? Michael, I saw you. Maybe you have a comment.
It's a machloket.
Yes,
so
great.
So I don't agree that more is better. Sometimes less is better. I also want to honor that some people, I've had the opportunity of talking to people over the years who had extremely disturbing experiences with psychedelics and who were traumatized for a long time afterwards as a result of what arose: fear realms, hell realms, alternative universes that really just shocked them to their soul. And I would not want to prescribe to them to take more medicine to heal that. I think you have to meet everybody where they are, and that recognize that these are powerful materials. People need to be pre-qualified and really screened first, that in order to have the best opportunity. And for those people who want to make meaning out of their experience, that needs to be done in a careful, loving, compassionate way in which we open-heartedly listen to the experiences that people had in these expanded states of awareness.
So then back to that question, just again, if someone does, even with all of the best of intention and all of with the highest quality of care, and people continue to have challenging experiences, what might we be able to offer them right now about how to integrate them for that meaning amplification or meaning making in this moment?
I just want to offer that I learned this process from Rabbi Bert Jacobson, who learned it from Miles Krasson, who learned it from the Baal Shem Tov. The three-part process of dealing with adversity, which has been very helpful. And the adversity can be out there or in here. And the three-part process is hachna'ah, havda'lah, hamtaka. Whatever is difficult, we need to totally face it, surrender to it, yield to it, to be in a place of being humbled by it. And from that place of hachna'ah, we do the havdalah, which we find the one spark of goodness that might be in it. Maybe it was almost all terrible, but there was one spark of goodness. And with some guidance, be able to find what that spark of goodness is. And when we bring our attention to that one spark, it grows, it reveals itself. And then comes the hamtaka, the sweetening from it. And so I think that what I would do with that person would be to guide them through a process like that.
Thank you for bringing that process in, because I think the hamtaka, again, from the sweetening from the Baal Shem Tov, who also said there is no bitter, there is no bad, only bitter. And some of those experiences take an incredible lifetimes, possibly decades at least. I think that going back to the original question, I don't think this is one we should answer in the generic. I think individuals are unique, and medicines, we're talking about a whole class of medicines. And that my hope is that that person, those people in that kind of situation, do not feel the shame or the isolation, and find the context in which to chew their experiences and metabolize them well.
I also just want to add how much these experiences really strike the chords of epigenetic memory and where we are in family systems, and for there to be a practiced and knowing person or sitter to allow the person to come out of experiences and allow it to begin to be woven into ancestral systems or theories of family trauma that people might not be aware of. And I think that's so much of the work that we do as rabbis. I think it's so much of the work we do with our liturgy, and ostensibly why I say the Torah begins with the book of Genesis and not Shemot, because you got to deal with your crazy mishpacha before you deal with becoming a nation. And the same too, I think, with psychedelics. You got to deal with yourself and where you came from before we can go into perhaps a more exalted and mystical experience.
You know, we've been talking a lot about psychedelics as, and we intend some things when we say that, but certainly when talking about plant medicine more broadly, right? Not just these psychoactive compounds, but the history of Judaism or our ancestors is having contact with many different kinds of plants. I might ask from the chat if someone could speak about the normalcy of alcohol consumption in Jewish tradition, and where to go with that as we rethink and revive practices and lift human existence in general. What role do you see alcohol playing in a continued way, in a new way, perhaps, in Jewish spiritual development and that unfolding?
What I would offer is that alcohol is a sacrament. I think we sacralized, and that was the first move of Judaism, was to sacralize this kind of change, of this opportunity to change consciousness using ethanol. And I think just in the same way that it deserves a bracha, and it can be an organizing opportunity for meals, for simchas, in the same way we want to sacralize any material that's used for expanded awareness.
May I respond to this also? I remember some friends in Safat, Rabbi Heller, when he says Kiddush, he has a Kabbalistic orientation, and this is the first time I experienced Kiddush. I just thought this was Kiddush. He picks up his Kiddush cup, and it takes him about 25 minutes to articulate and enunciate every vowel sound, every guttural in the saying of that Kiddush. And just in the ba of how he brings forth Kiddush is kind of an amuse-bouche or a foreplay into what the alcohol is going to do to our bodies. And I think it is a portal, and it is a ritual object portal that I think we've lost attachment to, in the sense of like we've made, in some ways, and I don't say this as a throwaway, like I think we've forgotten the power. The ancient Greeks understood the power of catharsis and the power of literature and the way that it impacts neuropsychology, and the same with even saying the bracha. So I think it starts with the prayer. It's not necessarily the alcohol. I think it's the prayer, and I think our connection to it and the cultivation of it, of prayer. Truly, prayer, Lachadodi should be an orgasm every Friday night, right? Like there we are, like with divine Yechud, finally manifesting. And for some reason, again, we've separated it out. And I think that's why I'm a psychedelic rabbi, because I feel like it's within our words, our language. What differentiated our God from all of the other gods of the ancient Near East is our God wrote. So it's through the word, like Shefa said, it could be one syllable, it could be one utterance, it could be one sound. So that's what I offer, that it's perhaps the alcohol is the afterthought to the prayer itself.
And maybe more attention being paid to the Mishkan, to the container in which it's coming in, because if that alcohol is coming into a container that's not well prepared with intention, then it can definitely throw you into places that are unhealthy.
Well, we only have a couple minutes left. So with this alcohol question, also, talking again about this powerful class of fungi, cacti, and plant medicine, and also opening up to the possibility. I know that there are a couple people that are in attendance right now, many different kinds of plant healers, right? Not only the ones that bring us to really profound psychedelic states, or even very open states of expanded states of consciousness, but things that are more mild, things that are more gentle, and to also seek them out, and knowing that there are many indigenous communities who are working with many different plants, and seeking them out also, and learning from them. So I would be so happy to just go around and let all of our psychedelic rabbis to let us know what they're working on currently and where you can find them for follow-up. Of course, you can follow the Jewish Entheogenic Society, which is a great place to have lots of different conversations with rabbis and everyone else. But let us know what your projects are currently and how they can find you.
Well, my project currently is called Love at the Center, and it's about bringing the Song of Songs into its rightful place at the center of Judaism, so that it's about love. And so I'm involved with deep immersion in the Song of Songs, and to be able to say, how do I live with this? And you're welcome to join. Come to my website and sign up for that.
The project that I'm currently working on is called theguidingpresence.com, which seeks to offer the wisdom of elders in the space about how you hold space in expanded states of awareness. And I think that's really where my work is focused, in core competencies, creating curriculum, and then creating the opportunities for this emergent idea of psychedelic chaplaincy.
My community is based,
Go ahead.
My community is based physically in the land between New Paltz and Kingston, New York. So if you're ever in the land of the Lenni Lenape, the Esopus, please come gather with us when it's safe for us to gather again. We've pivoted to every Friday night online at 6:30 Eastern. You can Zoom in. It's often ending before Shabbat if using your screen is after sundown is something you don't do on Fridays. Consider joining my newsletter or downloading our latest album, which is Pesach music, but you know, liberation is every day. So that information's in the chat.
And shalom all again. We're Open Temple here in Venice, California. You can find us at opentemple.org. I know that you had Joe Green on the other night. He's a co-creator with our community. We call everyone who's affiliated with our community co-creators because we believe we're creating this sacred space with one another. And a part of what's happening in Open Temple is we're taking over a performing arts space called Electric Lodge here in Venice. And so we invite everyone here, whoever is interested as things are opening up again, to come and bring their offerings. We also have a really healthy live streaming. So if people wanted to offer through our community, we're always happy to publicize. Our mailing list is about 10,000 right now. And I just say that because we need to support one another and grant visibility of the incredible holy work that we're all doing together. Thank you for including us today. I'm so grateful.
Thank you. And thank you all to our Psychedelic Rabbi panel. It was wonderful to be in this space, and thank you to everyone from the Jewish Entheogenic Society. That's a Facebook group that is close to 1,000 members, where many of these questions came from. Thanks to everyone who asked some questions in the Q&A. We'll have many more opportunities if your question wasn't answered today, that we'll be able to have conversations like these going on. And it's clear to me from this conversation, and this is the end of the day, that what is truly needed is some sort of psychedelic Beit Midrash with the Torah of consciousness, the Torah of healing, and the Torah of creativity. And perhaps this was just the opening for that moment and for that space. So thank you all for being part of this, for being part of the Jewish Psychedelic Summit. We've got the first half down, although we're having meetups that are starting very soon also to actually have more interaction between participants and learn more about what this space has to offer. We are just so grateful that people have joined us from everywhere again, and we will see you for more with the meetups tonight, and tomorrow we will continue with our panels. Kol Tuv, I hope all is well with you wherever you are. Thank you. May the blessings continue to flow and rain down, whether they are present or yet to be revealed. Take good care and see you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.